All right, we're going to get started. I want to thank everybody from coming on board. We do have a smaller group today, so feel free to ask questions in the chat anytime. I want to start by thanking our sponsors, MSN, a leading storage trade magazine, and StoreTrack, a leading supplier of self-storage data, both of them making our jobs easier to learn as self-storage changes on a regular basis. I want to have a special thanks to Aric, who is from Heartland Building Group. He's been in the self-storage business on the construction side for quite a while, and so we're excited to have him on board. Aric, can you give us a couple minutes background on yourself?
Yeah, born and raised in Indiana, live in Cincinnati. So if you guys can see out my window right now, I'm looking over at the Ohio River. Been building storage for over 12 years now. Have a background in industrial, and one of my clients in a different asset class called me one day and said, "Hey, I've got this project for you, Aric. We've been working on some actually fueling petroleum projects, but I bought this building and we're going to turn it to storage." And that's kind of where my journey in self-storage started. Been all over the country. Luckily, worked for a lot of, I would say, medium-sized, small to medium-sized family companies. They're developing self-storage and I will say the MSA markets all over the country. So I've been blessed to do that. And through that, have made a lot of great relationships. So pretty well connected in the self-storage industry, from suppliers, technology, you name it, and meeting people like Marc and then all yourself. So forward to helping everyone out here.
Yeah, and basically what we're going to be talking about today is development and construction failures. And a failure is in my book, is a loss of time and or money. Just one quick stat: 1 month delay in opening your facility, construction delays, you lose $50,000. So imagine if you lost 6 months delays, and I've seen that. I'm sure Aric's seen that as well. You lose 300,000. Typically, the solution is always going to have a better team and have self-storage experts check the designs and construction. You cannot assume the plans were checked by the designers. So that's make sure you've got that team. My background is I own multiple self-storages that I designed, and I hired the general contractor. I'm not a general contractor. I've used a lot, but together, when you put people like myself and Aric together, and you add another architect and engineer, you have a team that is undeniably going to save you a considerable amount of money. So Aric, let's start off with this question here. In your experience, how much money do you see lost between good plans and bad plans? You've been given good plans, you've seen good plans, you've seen bad plans. How much can somebody lose if they go out and bid a bad set of plans?
I'll use a real world example. I was actually on the site yesterday. It's an Atlanta project. Won't say exactly where in Atlanta, but it's in Atlanta. And we were pulled in by one of our clients. Someone else had started the project, had started a design. And I would say this is, we're in the business of building efficient and effective, right? Self-storage. You want something that's people want to rent at. But you don't need something that's going to make the cover of an Architectural Digest magazine. This one in particular, they had gone through zoning and had wood trim, had a facade that would say that was so over the top, it was pretty crazy. So we spent the next year, so there's money there, getting this redesigned, because their budget at how it was designed, they couldn't make a pro forma work. They couldn't get it. Now they had a great site. So I'll say this, they had a great location in a growing area. And they knew that, but they knew they also had a problem. So as we got involved there, just alone on the front facade, we probably shaved off close to 200,000. We went with some pretty, I would say we used a lot of insulated metal panels, particularly here. Used faux brick, still gives it the look of brick. It met the requirements of the city, and then moved off like wood trim, because that's a long-term maintenance issue, and really have a low maintenance front that looks absolutely fantastic. And on that alone, we're probably well over 200,000. And on that same project, we can talk about the site, the civil. They were looking at doing a multi-story project on a site that we had 25 feet of drop off. And what we went with there is actually putting a basement with a walkout to the back, and saved them close to 900,000 in hauling alone. So
that's awesome. In my book, I agree with you. The difference between bad plans and good plans is somewhere between $500,000 and $1 million. So it is critical that you have good plans. You know, you just told us one horror story that you've seen things happen. Can you tell me another horror story or two, where something went astray that really shouldn't have, if it was done properly in the beginning?
Yeah, so I mean, you can go to the other extreme where it's like a death by a thousand paper cuts, right? It's your plans. There's a lot of people who will. You can get a set of architectural plans, from a lot of different firms. We have an architect in house, but really our thing is no self storage, because it'll be everything from just where you have your units, where are you placing them? Are they something that's easy? Your mechanical units, your door hallways, widths, making sure you're maximizing space. If someone doesn't really understand storage, you'll end up with a lot of odd sizes. Corners that aren't really, we call it kind of dead space. You'll end up with an office that's too large or too small, but it's really, you're in the business of renting square footage, right? Renting that air. And so if you don't have someone that knows what they're doing, you will end up with an inefficient design. And it's all these little things that'll just add up.
Yeah, I just reviewed a set of plans for one of our franchisees, and they had 7-foot hallways.
Yeah.
You know, and the industry standard is 5 feet. It's enough. You're not going to rent more units because you have 7-foot hallways. Nobody sees your hallways till after they rent, and you lost 2 feet of rentable space. You would have had larger units, so you do see a lot of them. But I want to tell you, I think I 4 horror stories that are critical, and they're related to construction, but they're kind of pre-construction as well. And one is not knowing what's underground early in the projects.
Mhm.
Not doing your borings early. I've seen personally, one of our franchisees says, no, the architect said do it after I have my plan so we can get the building corners exact. We said no, you got them close enough, get them done. It turned out to be a phosphorus pit. You could push a pencil down 200 feet. They had to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to increase the size of the footing. Another site, we had it done early, and there's a lot of, and it was a couple $100,000 of trash, from the 40s, 50s, 60s, that you have to get that into your budget or negotiate with the seller about those things.
We had a project in Iowa where we found the original drive-in movie theater. The person had sold it. Hey, this is great. There's nothing been here. Yeah, this is perfect. It's been Iowa fields, built storage, and as soon as we broke ground, and then of course, then it's when the local neighbors come out and like, oh yeah, I remember going to the movie theater there when I was a kid. So
right. Well, and that's like borings, but that can be worse than trash because the screens are hazardous waste. So the other thing you got to do is environmental phase 1 and phase 2, if need be, right during the due diligence period. So I had a self storage myself that I built, and it cost us 50,000. And the problem is you don't know how much it's going to cost because you had to do test bits, take the material out, and then come back and take more test bits. And so you don't know. So fortunately the property was owned by the homeowner, and I partnered with him, not by the homeowner, by the developer. So we got through it at just 50,000. So you got to do the environmental. Another one, I've had plans brought to me and reviewed them and everything, and I said, where's the borings? And I'm thinking of one personally, and he went out and did the borings after the design was finished, and it should be practically before it started. Ledge, 2 feet, 4 feet, 6 feet. It had to be a completely different design. And even then it was questionable with that cost of the ledge. Was it worth it? So you've got to know what's underground.
I would say rock, yeah, like kind of with that, with those borings. I mean, really a couple things. How quickly do you hit, rock, shale, whatever it is. So you'll figure that out pretty quickly. Also, then in other parts of the country, where's your water table at? You'll want to know that pretty quickly as well. So borings give you a lot of information, more than just like, hey, where we're setting the building. It's also going to tell you subsurface, what's going on, the type of clay that you have, is it expansive? Do you have to worry about that? Those type of things.
Yep. And you mentioned the water table. You're building a detention pond. Sometimes it's good to hit the water table. Sometimes it's bad, depending on your design. So there's all kinds of things. I want to give you one more horror story. And I can say this because I am a civil engineer. I'm a professional engineer. I own an engineering company. Don't trust your engineer. It sounds sad, and the same goes through for your architect. But I can tell you several horror stories. And we always have the engineers go out and flag the wetlands immediately and do an endangered species study immediately. So we had this one project. We bought it based upon 6 acres, and we went out and flagged the wetlands, and it turned into 5. We could still do our design. We got the 90,000 square feet we needed, but we got a reduction in the price of about 500,000. The second thing was the environmental, and the environmental is real, not the environmental, the endangered species. 90% of the time, you look at a report at the state level, and it says, hey, you're not in an endangered species area, go to construction. So our franchisee, he knew the directions. I said, okay, make sure this is done. He called the junior engineer, and the junior engineer told him, there's no endangered species. I don't know. I guess he flat out lied or didn't understand the process. But when he went to build, we were delayed 3 years because it was an endangered species territory. We were fortunate. It was just a delay of 3 months. We did the endangered species. There was no endangered species. These endangered species maps are just very, very broad circles. So it doesn't automatically mean something bad. So
we call that the bugs and bunnies, but you definitely want to have that checked. I'll use an example, Orlando, Florida. On the north side, you have a specific bird, just kind of the north side of Orlando, that is definitely in there. You also have the tortoise. Every part of the country has, really, if it's the Indiana bat here in the north or, whatever it is, you just want to make sure you have that and know that up front, because that'll also, in your project schedule, I'll use clearing as an example, but if you have to clear, there's certain seasons that you can clear, or you're going to have to get a permit to clear in the summer because of the bat nesting season.
Yep. So a lot of things. Aric, and certainly I want to ask, is there anything you would tell a new developer? They're putting plans together. Don't forget to get this on your civil. Don't forget to get this on your architectural plans. So all the bidders are building apples to apples. And B, so there's no cost overruns because of misunderstandings, thinking the owner was going to do something or somebody else, or that wasn't needed on this project. Can you think of some things that quite often you see missing from plans that cost money to add them in as extras later on?
Well, I would also say, so it's sometimes it's a game that general contractors play. Always look at their exclusions. That'll be the first, like when bids come in, always see what people are excluding, because that is typically how someone's moving something to not my responsibility. I guess I'll use that term. And that's where they'll start hiding things, but that's where they'll put things that, hey, that's not in my bid, not my problem. And that's always the first telltale sign, is you have general contractors submitting that, is look and see what's in the exclusions. Really what that is, if you're working with an architect that's design self-storage that knows what they're doing there, you're going to have a better set of plans. So your mechanical scopes, it'll be good, right? You're going to have specified equipment, plumbing, though basic, not a huge part of what we do in storage, but it's just making sure like, hey, this is our spec for our sink. Lights are the same thing. Now I would say, on lighting, when it comes to electrical layout for self-storage, it's having someone that understands, we can do 8-foot lights instead of 4s. Things I see that designers do that just cost more money. If you have 4-foot lights, you have to have more of them, right, to cover that same space. If you do 8-foot LED lights in the hallways, right, you can use less of them. And then that's where you'll see like some generals will bid it not per plan. So you're going to have to go back and make sure that's always tied to it. But it's really from the design. Get it early and make sure you have a good team that has a really good set of plans, and it doesn't leave a lot of stuff that's kind of open for interpretation.
Yeah, I can piggyback on that. If you don't have a brand name in there,
yes,
they can bring in the lowest quality and be meeting the contract.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. It always seems to fall through the crack is the entrance gate. What dimension? What's the opening? Does it have battery backup? Does it have the safety trip lights? Does it meet the safety requirements? And a lot of time, all I see on plans, the civil plans, is gate. They don't even say the opening. Some towns require 20-foot gates. Some require larger. But there's also you don't want to go with an 8-foot gate either. So it needs to be specified, including the manufacturer, and it has to. Your bid has to say no changing specifications unless they're noted in your bid. If they find they've got something better, or want to provide you an alternate, great. But if they just bid the plans and you don't have that product name, and there's a lot of them, you could get a gate without a battery backup. What happens when the people are inside, and they can't get out because the power's down?
Well, I think on the gate and kind of the whole technology is, making sure you're OpenTech or PTI, you're specifying, both or who you prefer from a equipment supplier. Because what I see a lot is people bid it and then they'll go like some off the shelf, whatever you've never heard of, dealt with them in the past. And then you got to come back, a couple of years later. I see there's a couple of questions coming in.
Yeah. We got one question coming in about cost, and in a second we'll get to that one. But on the same topic, I've got a lot here, but we're running out of time. If we have time, we'll come back to things I've seen missing on the building plans, from the number of bollards are always wrong, underground conduit wiring, access cameras. A lot of that conduit plan is not prepared in advance, and so things crisscross and just become a headache and a delay during construction.
That's always a good electrical plan, is make sure you have conduits. If you're running between buildings, hey, specify. I would always tell everyone, run a spare. You never know what you need to run in the future, and it's a minimal investment up front, but put another 2-inch conduit between buildings. Same thing, conduits out the gates, making sure you have access for your low voltage. Wireless is getting better, but I'm still of the mindset of making sure your stuff's wired in with Cat 6.
Well, it's kind of, we've been talking about this, but anything else you can think of that you can avoid change orders, and B, just as important, make the best of change orders. I've got one fact. I read this, and Aric, maybe you can tell me if you believe it. But I was reading some self-storage development report, and it said if you take 2 weeks to sign a change order and get it all done, that can delay your project 4 weeks, double whatever time, because things were set on a time clock, and when you cancel out somebody, they're going to go to another job, and they're not going to come back just because you got something fixed. They got to wait for their slot. So if you have a change order, take care of it immediately.
Yeah, I always understand the impact of, so a change order comes in, and let's just say it's for a piece of equipment that has to be ordered. Well, the questions you want to ask, it's always scope, schedule, budget, but what's our lead time, right? Like, hey, when is when is my due date that I have to sign this so it doesn't impact? I would always know that in the back of my mind. It's kind of like
that's a good question. Ask them. Yeah.
It's like a quarterback. You got to know when you need to throw the ball. The 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000. If you sit on change orders, and then it's going to come back. Got a client we work with. We do a lot of consulting as well, and trying to get some stuff worked out for him. Well, that particular general contractor, we've been brought in to help because they waited to the end to try to drop a bunch of change orders on the project. Well, what are you doing there? Then it's like it's almost like a detective, and I'm trying to go back and find emails. So I would say with change orders, document things, have things in email, not verbally, make sure you're getting the information. That's always kind of a telltale sign if someone doesn't want to put something in writing for you. You as an owner, as a developer, that would be a red flag for me. So it's just, it's really managing the process, and don't sit on something. It's I always joke, Heartland, our logo is a bison, because they run into a storm. Don't go bury your head like an ostrich. Like, let's figure it out. Let's work through it. Let's get the facts, the pertinent information, and then you got to make a decision.
Yeah, and if you're a self-storage developer, and it's not your 10th self-storage, and a contractor says, hey, I'm just going to bring this over and do this, it's not a big deal. Don't accept that. Make sure the day you get that change order, it goes to your engineer, it goes to your architect. There are so many conflicting things. We just had one yesterday where they wanted to change the gate location, and I explained to them, you can't do that. It just doesn't work. And then B, it doesn't meet code. There's separation distances from the gate to the keypad, and there's logistical problems, and then there's user problems. But it sounded so innocent. But finally, the contractor actually admitted, oh yeah, my plan would have never worked. Let me go back to the drawing board and bring something back to you.
Yeah, I always like anytime there's an issue, have someone come with a solution. Ask if there's another way to do it. Value engineering opportunity here. So if you do have a change order, that might just be their opinion or how they want to do it, or a lot of times it might be the easiest. I always say the best ideas come from the field, so talk to the people, or make sure that your GC, your general contractor, is talking to the tradespeople, the electrician. One of my best friends is an electrician. He and I have worked together for 24 years now, and I always bounce stuff, and he gives me great ideas all the time of, hey, this is like from a person who does it on a daily basis. Hey, here's how I'd solve that problem. And I think that's just where the best ideas and the best solutions come.
Yeah, we just had one the same gate. They wanted to change the man door to the opposite, from the building to the opposite side. I said, why do we want everybody to have to walk across the driveway to get to the man door? We want it right here.
Yeah.
And some people don't put a man door on, and it's required by code. Otherwise, people get inside the self-storage, they're locked in.
Yeah. You always had to have a gate with a break bar to get out.
Well, I see self-storages being done with a exit man gate that doesn't have a breaker bar, so it's not automatic. That it's only a man door exit gate door is only locked one way. It's locked. It's locked in, but out there's no lock on it. They have to be able to push it. But I've seen them when there's a lock both directions. It's people just don't know. Even the town doesn't know because they accepted it.
Yeah, and even and the reason you do that is in case of emergency. Let's just say there is something happening, right, and the power's out and there's something going on. You want the people to get away from the building to escape. That's really a lot of times driven by fire code.
Yeah. Well, Aric, I'm going to give you the next question, but at the same time, maybe you can answer David's question about cost per square foot. My next question is, discussing a couple of specific or general tips on how to reduce self-storage construction costs. But along with that, I'm looking over here at David, and he not including land costs. What's the average costs for construction per square feet?
Yeah, so I would say true construction cost. And we always say with a 60-40 climate, non-climate. So your traditional single story self-storage building right now, and this is actually right before the meeting, that I had my team kind of run the last 5 and kind of run some averages. And we were running in a range, so kind of use our fairway analogy here, but we were from 70 to 82. And that's the projects that we've kind of seen come through. And what causes a lot of that, let's say, what makes something a higher end of the range? A lot of times that's city requirements, what we have to do on facade, if we have to do a brick or a stone, versus like a traditional R panel, which is the most cost effective way. And that's R panel's a rib metal panel. So that's your kind of your traditional self-storage exterior. So that'll drive it a lot. Other things, site work, site's always your variable, right? Your building, you could build that in the air and come up with a pretty good prototype and plan and understand those costs and really drop that anywhere in the country. Site work's just always the X factor. Hey, what's going on below subsurface? What's your topography look like? So we can kind of talk about great ways to save money, kind of dovetailing into I think your question there, Mark, of like site, just understand site costs. Like when you go in, are you hauling in or you're hauling off? Like I tell everyone, when you see that truck leaving the job site, that's dollar bills going up. Especially with the diesel at where it's at. So yeah, that's an easy way to help keep costs in line is find what I call relatively level sites. That's a great way to start.
Yeah, and let me follow up on that a little bit. One of the things we like to do at Storage Authority is have the contractor review the site early on, because it's so important. The utilities, the grading, other things, the road network. Can you see for the exit? But and another cost savings is having weekly design meetings with the design team. You'll get better plans, complete plans, and faster by having weekly meetings with the engineer and architect. And don't take this is how we do it here. In the state of New Jersey, they have a mindset 6 inches of pavement. Okay. The whole rest of the country, it's 3 inches. So when I questioned the civil engineer the first time, he said, that's New Jersey. Everybody does it. And I said, but that is crazy. We only need 3 inches, not 6 inches. Oh, he said, finally, after questioning, he says, you can waiver. You can get a waiver if you do this little calculation. I said, well, how long is it going to take you to do the calculation? Half an hour. I said, do the application of that waiver and save our client $80,000 because they were going to put down 6 inches. So, have those weekly design meetings. It's critical. Have the contractor look at the utilities. So many times I've seen our franchise, oh yeah, the utilities are right on our side of the street, blah, blah, blah. They're on the other side of a street of a 4-lane highway, and they won't let you cut the pavement. You got to bore across. It just costs you $50,000. And the problem is there's 10 or 20 of these $50,000 if you don't get them right. In this case, we actually got a discount in the price again because we were told the utilities were on our side of the street.
Yeah, I was going to say that's one of the projects we just had to go through. We had to bring our sewer had to go under the road, and it's a state route, and it's we had to get a lot of I would say additional approvals to be able to. We had to directionally bore to go out, and then it's kind of crazy. On the other side of the state route, there was a street that teed in, and then that's where we were tying into. But it's just kind of an interesting aspect of every project. Understand your utility connections, gas, electric, depending on what type, where you're at in the country and what type of mechanical system you're going to use. Yeah, I think that's one of the first questions. We do that early. We call it a site investigation report. So when we go out to a site for the first time to walk it, we're looking at utilities and where are they at, and if there is something that's I call it like how you really it's all about how you manage risk. It's like, hey, this is an item we need to follow up in.
Yeah, I like to say you should have your architect, engineer, contractor, myself on board before you start looking for land.
Yeah.
You're going to save hundreds of thousands of dollars, and you're going to save months and months and months of time because you're going to, I see too many people spending money looking at sites where a team, maybe it wasn't me, maybe it was me, maybe it was Aric, maybe it was the next guy. They tell you a problem. Oh, here's this regulation that doesn't allow you to go 3 stories. Oh,
yeah.
This is going to be $500,000 extra to take this extra material out. So put that team together. David
I was going to say, like your FAR, like your floor area ratio, or your buildable space. It's different in every state, every municipality. But is there a cap there that you can only give? Hey, it's a great lot, it meets everything, but at the end of the day, if you have like a 0.25, well, you're really going to limit the number of buildings and what you on a site. But everything else will look great. And we've had clients, buy land without getting into the details, and realize, oh yeah, we can only do 30,000 square foot of storage here.
Yeah. Well, and that brings us to the second part of David's question. He's kind of asking what's a sweet spot? How much should I build compared to the rentable square feet and everything? But typically there's so many different choices. If you're trying to build something in your backyard, and you want to build 50 units, you own the land, you're going to do some of that work, you happen to be a contractor, you just want to make an extra 20 grand a year, great. From my perspective, most of our clients want to be able to retire and make the same or even double their income as soon as possible. They don't have to retire, but that's kind of one of their goals they're looking for. And we found that one sweet spot in order to the REITs to buy them, and you can manage with one manager instead of 2 or 3 managers, is about 80,000 net rentable. You lose about 20%, 15%. So that's going to give you a rentable square feet of 64,000. That's a great efficient size. And we don't do it per unit. We don't say per unit. We say net rentable square feet, because some places they're building 10 by 30s. Some places they're building a lot of 5 by 5. So it's not the number of units, but just in this design 65 net rentable, you can get 650 units plus or minus. I've seen it a lot more, and I've seen it less depending on the sizes.
And I would say, Mark, probably a good note for everybody is when you talk to a contractor, we always think gross, right? Because we have to build the hallways, we have to build the office, we have to build space. So when you're talking to contractors, I've seen this happen where they say, hey, we want to build 65,000 square feet. Contractor, I hear that's gross, 65,000 square feet. Oh, that's great. What the person was thinking is, hey, at the end, I want basically a net of 65. So 2 very different terms and how it's used in our industry. I just want everyone to know that. So gross, always think gross and net. So hey, gross, you're going to put gross on a site, but you ultimately want to end up netting and hit it there. If you have efficient layouts, let's just say you've got your 80% efficiency there, minus your hallways and IT closet, whatever you may have. That's where you're going to really hone into that. So, and then it's all market driven.
Yeah. And the prices Aric gave before, and I don't want to speak for Aric, but that's not for 25,000 square feet. A small facility will cost you double. That's for a facility that's 80,000 square feet built all at once. The smaller your facility is, the more it costs per square foot to build, and just the opposite too. The larger it is, the less it is per square foot to build. So there's a variable there on cost to square footage.
Yeah. And I always kind of explain to people, like, why is it that way? it's like there's a lot of costs, like your site work and everything. That it's like kind of like peanut butter, and the more bread you can spread it over, it's thinner, right? So those costs, on a per square foot price, are coming down on a little bit bigger site. But if you go out to build one building, there's a lot of upfront costs. There's a lot of things that you're going to do, just even the general conditions, that's going to drive that per square foot price much higher.
And I'm reading between the lines on David's question, and I'm going to answer it, but it's also very dangerous to answer. So you got to take it with a grain of salt because there's so many variables. And that question is, say I'm going to build this project, 64,000 net rentable. How much rent do I need to be able to collect in order to make this project work? If the rent averages $90 a unit or 90 cents a square foot, you can't build. You just can't afford to build. So I'm saying, just from our experience and our math, the average rental rate of your project is got to be $1.60 per square foot or better to really to make a profit. And the reason it's not going to be less, it could be higher, because if you pay $2 million for your land, great. There's a lot of places you can pay $2 million for land, but those are places that the 10 by 10 rents for $300 and not $200 and not $90. So you've got to, just in the average USA, not in these cities where land costs a fortune, but if you paid $1 million for land, you've got to start at $1.60 per square foot on the average. So when you go out and check the neighborhood and visit them, if they're all charging $1.80, $2 for a 10 by 10, well, that's going to work. But if they're all charging 80, 90, or 130, it's not going to work. The problem is, when you see the prices online for the big players now, when you see the prices even in the office, those are often teaser rates. They're not effective rates. So you have to figure out the effective rate, because what these guys do in 2 months, I had to rent to self-storage in Florida for the hurricane. 2 months later, my rent from $65 to $100. And at month 10, it went to 120. So it went up quite a bit in the first 2 months. And then by month 10, it was it was 210,000. So they are playing this game. So it's hard to figure out what people are renting nowadays. It's very hard.
I would say, Mark, and just having come out of the kind of the conference season for our national self-storage conferences, I mean, the dynamic pricing, I think you hear that word get used a lot, but everyone's kind of talking about that. So yeah, when you're doing your market study locally, is really understand who's doing what. I would shop them, right? Like go check them out, go talk to them. I have clients that pay us to go be secret shoppers for them if they're looking at building a project in the area. Something we always do for fun, but I'll go in and explain to them I'm a contractor and I need some space to store some lights, competitor coming in town. But then we kind of get the rates and we take it back and kind of give them a feel for what the facility looked like.
Yep. And I want to answer Mr. Patel's question. And he's saying he understood it's better to buy than build. It's not better to do either one. It's based upon your personal goals. If you buy a facility, you're paying somebody else to find that land. You paid somebody else to figure it out, get it approved. You paid somebody else to get it full, and that means you'll probably get a return on 2 to 5% the first year you own it. And your profits come by raising the rent year after year after year. Most of our franchisees build the self-storage because they don't want to wait 20 years to make a 30% return. They want to see some good returns. Once they fill it up, they want to see good returns. And so you're going to make a significantly higher profit, double, triple, at least, maybe more if you build it yourself. But if you got a ton of money and you just want to put it somewhere safe, and you don't have the time to go through development, hey, you're better off buying a self-storage and not building. So it depends on what you're looking for. There's no one answer for everybody.
Yeah, and just kind of piggyback on that. We've worked for everyone in my career, I've done conversions, I've done value add, have seen it all, single story, multi-story, consulted on a bunch of other stuff and ideas that people have had kind of over the years. I always say, like, it's like very market driven, right? Like, you're going to get in, but hey, maybe there's a market where you can't build self-storage and there's an existing one. And that's a great place to, buy and rebrand it and, kind of fly your flag. That it's kind of makes sense. But I would be looking just from a competitive perspective. I'd be trying to find, areas where, hey, you can get in, you can find a nice piece of dirt that you can, make your own and build your building. There's just a lot more value. It's all about value creation, and by being a developer, there's value that you're creating for yourself long term that then rolls into your operations.
Well, we've hit our time frame here of a half an hour. We actually went 10 minutes more. I actually see I've got a couple more questions for Aric, but we want to be respectful of everyone's time. Garrett from our office will email this program to everybody. He will also email a development deck, or actually a construction deck that Aric did recently for another group. So you'll have a copy of that. You'll look at, more things organized than the discussion here today. And at the same time, Garrett will send our contact information. So you have any questions, feel free to, give Aric a call. I'm sure he'll help you. And likewise for me, open book and ready to help anybody that has questions. If anybody has any questions right now, please put them in the chat, or if anybody wants to hear a couple more stories, let us know. We could go another 10 minutes for more horror stories, because they're, and the thing is, it's just because they didn't do the, I want to say it's not always about the design. It's not always about this. It's about the follow through to make sure how you execute, I guess is the word I'm looking for. Right now in self-storage, so much money is being lost in execution because people didn't realize, hey, you need a team to know what to execute, and you need the time to execute that. So self-storage works. You're going to see a lot of great P&Ls, but that P&L does not say, if you don't execute, you lose. If you don't execute, you lose money. If you don't execute, it takes 3 years to rent up instead of 2 years to rent up.
I don't know, Mark, your thoughts, but I would say on the execute, and we utilize a project process, and I can't take credit for it. It goes back to my days I spent at Procter & Gamble, but we took a project process. It's 5-phase, super simple. Initiate, plan, design, construct, right? It's that easy. But what happens where most of these, I would call it horror stories, challenges, issues, whatever arise, is people skip a step, right? Like it's like anything. There's a logical sequential order of developing a site. But what happens is people jump through that planning stage. That's a lot of times where things kind of go awry. They want to get going so quickly, and they're so excited, and hey, we want to get going. But it's like kind of the slow is fast mantra of like, hey, let's get a team together. Let's have a really good plan. Now, you can't stay in planning forever, right? You actually have to execute. You have to move forward with the design, but just take a little bit of time to come up with your game plan, and you'll get a lot of this risk. You'll de-risk it up front, or you'll realize, hey, there's an issue, and therefore you can make an informed decision, not one where you're sitting, 8 months later where you're trying to open and, oh, by the way, we have this.
Right. And, in Aric's case, he can be your general contractor. He can be design build. He can come in even as the owner's rep,
Yep.
checking somebody else's work. So there's different needs for different people. But with that, we will conclude. Thanks for coming on board. Hopefully you learned an item or two that will save you some time and money. And again, please give us a holler if you have any questions.
I tell everyone, just connect with me on LinkedIn, reach out, happy to help. I do a lot of, I would say, consulting, speaking. The presentation that you guys will get afterwards, PowerPoint, I've actually just gave that to a fairly large group, as all project managers, but it was just kind of same thing, going through some common areas where they have challenges and how you can really upfront help de-risk your project and work on those early so that you have your probability of success goes up significantly.
Yep. If you're on the fence whether to get into self-storage or not, Aric and I are more than happy to have a call with you and one-on-one on what it takes and the time frames and the costs and this day and age, it doesn't take long to get the information. So we'll kick you off the fence. We can't tell you which side, but we'll definitely kick you off the fence if we get to know.
I'll say this, Mark. I've been blessed to work in a lot of different asset classes: logistics, warehouse, oil and gas. We build projects all over the country. We do a lot of different interesting things. Self-storage is my favorite, kind of going back to how it started for me with a buddy. But I would say this, I work with more family-owned businesses who are successful and have great businesses because of self-storage. I don't see that in all my other asset classes. So it's it becomes bigger corporations, and I think there's still an opportunity for an individual developer in self-storage.
All right. With that, everybody have a great Thursday and a great weekend. Hopefully we'll hear from you soon.